Africa. We're beaming live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. We are Amen. Today on Spotlight Africa, United Nations raises alarm at the exclusion of President Biya's rival from vote. Kabila slams treason trial, calls death penalty bid political. Mali-Sogo region curfew extended by 30 days amid rising violence. Sudan appeals for aid after landslide kills more than 1,000 in Darfur. Plus, migrant surge along eastern route despite rescue and mountain deaths. These stories are all just ahead on Spotlight Africa. Stay with us. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. First on Spotlight Africa, United Nations officials called for the government of Cameroon to ensure free and transparent elections, citing several recent incidents that raised concern about the country's upcoming election, where President Paul Biya will seek an 8th term in office. During the bi-weekly press briefing in Geneva, Jeremy Lawrence, the spokesperson for the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, warned of rising restrictions on the activities of opposition political parties in the lead up to the election, including the ban of certain gatherings, the exclusion of some political figures from the race, and irregularities in voter registration. Recall that the 92-year-old president announced in July that he would seek re-election, ending speculation that he might step aside. Cameroon's second president since independence from France in 1960, Biya has been in power since 1982. Biya, Africa's second longest-serving president after Theodore Obiang of Equatorial Guinea, is frequently sick and abroad. In Congo, the former President Joseph Kabila has reacted Tuesday after military prosecutors sought the death penalty during his treason trial last week. Kabila denounced a political move designed to silence the opposition. He criticized his successor, Felix Tshisekedi, saying he had not taken responsibility for his government's failures. Kabila also accused Tshisekedi of corruption related to the mining provinces of Kantaga. The former head of state also called for a dialogue between all parties of the national political scene. He said reconciliation will come neither from partial agreements nor from selective trials. Recall that Kabila ended his 2-year self-imposed exile in April when he arrived in Goma just months after M23 rebels seized the eastern city. The Congolese Senate later revoked his parliamentary immunity, paving the way for legal proceedings. The ex-president is being tried in absentia before the High Military Court since late July in a treason case that includes war crimes, rape and murder charges. Congolese authorities accuse him of supporting the Rwandan-backed M23 group and plotting to overthrow the government. Meanwhile, Kabila described the claims as false and politically motivated and denounced the lack of evidence. Here in West Africa, Ghana's annual inflation rate slowed for the 8th month in a row in August, reaching its lowest level since October 2021, the government statistics service said on Wednesday. Good news for Ghana, where inflation continued to decline in August for the 8th consecutive month. It now stands at 11.5% year-on-year, down from 12.1% in July. That's the lowest level in almost 4 years. Both food and non-food prices eased last month, the government says, but food remains the largest driver of inflation. The gold, oil and cocoa producing West African nation is emerging from its worst economic crisis in decades. The local cedi currency is up over 20% against the dollar so far this year. In July, the country's central bank showed faith in the improving situation by lowering its key interest rates to 25%, a cut of 300 basis points, the largest cut in its history. Government officials say they remain optimistic that they will hit the year-end inflation target of 11.9% ahead of schedule. In a separate development, authorities in Mali's central Sogo region have extended a nighttime curfew in place since June by another 30 days after a new wave of violence in the area. The prolonged curfew took effect on the 3rd of September and runs to 2nd of October between midnight and 5 a.m. The Sogo governor first installed a local 30-day curfew in June, originally applying between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. The latest extension of the measure came after armed men killed the mayor of the rural town of Dogofrey on Saturday. Local sources attributed the murder to traditional dozer hunters. Jihadis from the Islamist Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin (JNMI) organization also attacked the military camp in the town of Farabogo on the 19th of August, forcing civilians to flee and the army to give up their positions. JNIM claims to have killed 21 soldiers and several civilians, but no official death toll has been released. Combatants from the Al-Qaeda-linked group have since retained control over Farabogo. These attacks illustrate the ongoing security threats gripping Mali and the Sahel. In a rather sad development, search and rescue teams are racing against time in Sudan's western Darfur region after a catastrophic landslide buried the remote village of Tarasin in the Mara Mountains. Around 100 bodies have been recovered so far, but the Sudan Liberation Movement Army fears the death toll could reach as high as 1,000. The disaster struck on August 31st following days of heavy rain. The United Nations say the full scale of the tragedy remains unknown as the area is extremely difficult to reach. The landslide has compounded an already dire humanitarian crisis in Sudan, where civil war, displacement, and food shortages have devastated communities for the past 2 years. The Mara Mountains, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, are known for their unique climate, cooler and wetter than the surrounding region, conditions that contributed to the landslide and continue to hamper rescue efforts. In a related development, Sudan appealed for international aid on Tuesday after a landslide wiped out an entire village in western region of Darfur, killing an estimated 1,000 people in one of the deadliest natural disasters in the country's recent history. The village of Tarasin was completely leveled to the ground, the Sudan Liberation Movement Army said, as it appealed to the United Nations and international aid groups for help to recover the bodies. Reports say the tragedy happened Sunday in the village located in central Darfur's Mara Mountain. After days of heavy rainfall, Abdelwahid Naar, the group leader, made an appeal on Tuesday for international help. Migrant surge along eastern routes despite risk and mounting debt is a problem on the continent. We'll look at this in a minute after we take a quick breather. Stay with us.
your horizon is what every living being not only genuinely desires, but heartily pursues and intentionally invests in. For in the gathering of men, only those whose minds are in tune with the dynamics of the past, present, and future innovations, inventions, politics, and governance are respected. We are Spectrum Television, and broadening your horizon is our obsession. Risk on your decoder now to connect Spectrum Television on the frequency 12589, symbol rate 26250. That is frequency 12589, symbol rate 26250. Polarization horizontal, and join our online community at spectrumtvlive.ng. For further inquiries, please call 0704 158 5642 or 0704 541 7707. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
tuned, and let's bring you to the rest of the stories on Spotlight Africa. Looking at migration issues on the continent, migrant journeys along the deadly eastern route from the Horn of Africa to the Arabian Peninsula have surged sharply in 2025, despite rising risk and mounting debt. Between January and June, over 238,000 migrants made the perilous trip, a 34% jump from last year. But it comes at a tragic cost, at least 348 migrants dead or missing, many lost in Djibouti's scourging Obok Desert, drowned at sea, or caught in violent attacks by smugglers. Women and girls are increasingly vulnerable, with female transit through Djibouti more than doubling. At the same time, over 55,000 Ethiopians have been forcibly returned from Saudi Arabia, mostly to conflict-hit regions like Amhara, Tigray, and Oromia, where humanitarian needs are already there. Aid agencies warn migrants are trapped between danger abroad and despair at home. Even with a slight dip in movements during Ramadan and enforcement crackdowns, the IOM says if this trend continues, 2025 will surpass last year's migration numbers. Now to Nigeria. A tragic boat accident in the north-central Niger state has left at least 60 people dead, with many more still missing, after an overloaded vessel capsized on Tuesday morning. The disaster occurred near the Gasawa community in Bogo around 11 a.m. local time, when the wooden boat carrying over 100 passengers struck a submerged tree stump and overturned, throwing everyone into the water. Most of the victims were women and children, officials confirmed. At least 10 survivors remain in critical condition, and emergency responders, along with local divers, continue to search for those still unaccounted for. Authorities said the boat was dangerously overloaded, which is a common factor in boat accidents across Nigeria. Other frequent causes include poor maintenance, lack of safety oversight, and unpredictable weather conditions. Saadu Inuwa, the district head of Shagumi, said the impact was devastating. He said the entire families have been lost. The incident highlights the urgent need for better regulation and safety enforcement on Nigeria's inland waterways. To bring to a close the news stories on Spotlight Africa today, South African authorities say extreme poverty and the severe lack of affordable housing were major factors in the deadly Johannesburg building fire 2 years ago. Recall that in August of 2023, 77 people died and many more were injured after a fire gutted the Osindiso building in Marshalltown, where many poor people were living. The tragedy shocked the nation and highlighted the deep housing inequalities in Africa's wealthiest city. Inequalities the authorities promised to address. The report, the final one to be released, has not been made public, but the Gauteng provincial government, which commissioned it, shared some key findings. One person is currently on trial over the deadly blaze. Shemtensimo Ndalusi initially confessed to starting the fire but recanted his statement when the trial got underway. He has since pleaded not guilty to 76 counts of murder, among other charges. Among the findings shared was that hijacked buildings, properties overtaken by criminals who charge others rent, are not the primary problem plaguing downtown Johannesburg's abandoned buildings. Instead, the report found that only 5% of the city's buildings had allegations of rent collection by non-owners. And these are all the stories we're able to bring to you at this time around the continent. Do what for us on social media. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website, spectrumtvlive.ng. Spotlight Africa, the IMF.